France reasserts its right to offend. Emmanuel Macron defends caricatures of Prophet Muhammad. Critics accuse the president of launching a secular crusade against Islam. I'm Ali Hassan, and today's newsmaker is the showdown between French secularism and the Muslim world. The French president's sanctioning of Charlie Hebdo cartoons that depict the Prophet Muhammad drew the ire of Muslims in and outside Europe. His stance on freedom of expression, combined with a declaration that France needs its own enlightened Islam, has led some to accuse Macron of waging a cultural war against Islam. Is he stirring the pot to gain domestic political points? And is that really worth it, considering the global economic backlash it's prompted? Adam Platz reports.
France appears to be walking back President Emmanuel Macron's comments in defense of depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, or at least to want to clarify their meaning. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian was dispatched to Egypt to meet President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar Mosque, one of Sunni Islam's highest authorities.
I have emphasized and emphasize here the deep respect we have for Islam. I have also emphasized, and this is obvious to me, that Muslims in France are part of the history and identity of the French Republic. What we are fighting is terrorism. It is the hijacking of religion. It is extremism.
Macron's remarks offended Muslims worldwide. They came after the beheading of a French teacher, Samuel Paty, by an 18-year-old man of Chechen descent who had grown up in France. Paty was murdered in retaliation for showing pictures of the Prophet Muhammad in his classes. Prior to Paty's murder, Macron had already angered Muslims by describing Islam as a religion in crisis. Protests have taken place in countries from Indonesia through Bangladesh and Pakistan to the Middle East, the Maghreb, and West Africa.
We have boycotted the L'Oréal Paris products and all the Paris or France products we have, just because of we know that what they have done and what they have said about our Prophet. So we are boycotting these products so we can show them our power and the power of the Muslim community in the world.
Many have called not just for a boycott, but also for diplomatic measures to be taken.
My demand to my government is that they must end diplomatic ties with France by sending its ambassador home.
Since Paty's murder, another attack, this time at a church in Nice, left 3 dead, one of whom was almost beheaded. The suspect is a recently arrived asylum seeker from Tunisia. During a memorial service to honor the dead, the mayor's speech seemed both conciliatory and antagonistic.
As with any war that is declared against us, we must resist, a resistance that must first be rooted in unity. France is rich in men and women who are infinitely different. Let us respect those who respect this.
So is France simply defending its laïcité, a system of secularism that separates the state from religion and guarantees freedom of expression to all, no matter how unpalatable it might be to some? Or are French politicians defending actions that many Muslims argue should be criminalized as hate crimes? Adam Platz, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Paris by Anne Giudicelli. She's a former French diplomat and the founder of Terrorisc, a consulting firm specializing in political and security risks. In New York is Denis Franceskin. He's a member of Marine Le Pen's National Rally and is the party's representative abroad. And in Atlanta, we have Khaled Beydoun. He's an associate law professor at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law, who has written extensively about Islamophobia. Anne, as an experienced diplomat, what do you make of the boycotts imposed on the part of many Muslim countries of French products in response and in retaliation to Emmanuel Macron's statements concerning the cartoons?
Well, it's not only boycott, but also some official position that most of the Arab and Muslim leaders have taken regarding the republishing of Charlie Hebdo cartoons, as well as the position, the French position on the radical Islam. So, I mean, it was, of course, predictable that such reaction will occur in the region. I mean, it's the decision of the president and let's say its own political cycle. But of course, we know it's easy to forecast such a reaction.
But did you expect indeed this harsh reaction? Did you indeed expect the unified stance on the part of many Muslim countries to impose a boycott on French products?
Well, the boycott is not so wider. I mean, reactions are wider, opposition and some protest and so on, but boycott is not so many countries and is not for the moment impacting on the French economy and French exportations. So let's say what we have to keep in mind is much more the impact of the image of France much more, and on the diplomatic issues more than in, for the moment, economical issues.
Denis, last time you and I spoke, it was when Macron introduced a new legislation to fight radical Islam. Much has happened since then. The cartoons, the murder of Samuel Paty, of course, the very tragic incident in Nice. A lot came together. Now we're at a stage where Macron is more or less trying to smoothen things over with the Muslim world. How do you evaluate his position and his behavior and conduct up until now?
I stand to what I said, last time we spoke. He talked about the situation, which is a good thing. It's the first president to actually name those reprehensible acts that France has been facing for many years. However, I'm afraid, and it's starting to be proven now that this is just talk. Regarding the ban of economical products, I agree with our panelists. What's more important is the reaction of people, and what's more important is the reaction of leaders. I don't think boycotting perfume will make the French economy collapse. However, the reaction of people in France and abroad, because of caricatures. I mean, we're just talking about drawings here. We're not talking about waging a war or threatening a country, to be military attacked. We're talking about drawings. We're talking about pictures. And if the reaction for pictures is to kill people, or just to burn everything around, that's a very geopolitical issue that must be addressed.
Khaled, what do you make of the argument that Denis also made, that these cartoons are caricatures are undoubtedly insulting and hurtful to the Muslim world, but they are caricatures at the end of the day, and the reaction is disproportionate. So what do you make of those arguments, Khaled?
Well, look, there's a fundamental contradiction in France that's propagated by the state, right? So the state wants to advance the idea that there's freedom of expression when that freedom of expression is criticizing or demonizing Islam and Muslims. However, what is encompassed by freedom of expression is also freedom of conscience, right? The ability of French citizens and French residents to practice whatever faith they want to adhere to and whatever faith that they believe in. Roughly 8 million French people are Muslims, yet they're denied the right to express their religion and exercise their freedom of conscience. So what is it? I mean, what does the French state want in terms of freedom of expression? Is it okay to express ideas and express speech that is demonizing an entire religion? And why is it not okay when that freedom of expression and that freedom of conscience is exercised by Muslims simply trying to exercise their faith? That, I think, is what is at the heart of the issue here, is a fundamental contradiction in liberty that is advanced by the state.
And what do you make of Khaled's reply and response?
Well, first of all, I would like to underline that it's not a war against Islam, and the president has tried to explain that, notably in speaking to some Arabic medias and even UK medias, in order to explain that that is not, let's say, a state position allowing Charlie Hebdo cartoons, and then the offense that because the prophet has been mocked through those cartoons, but it's in France we have the freedom of expression for media, so the medias are not representative of the state. That's the thing, first of all, that it's not working like that in many other countries, and that has to be said once for all. Secondly, I mean, secularism is very hard to understand, even for the French citizen, because it has not been well applied. In fact, we have a state of law, we have regulations specific to secularism, and some of, let's say, political people or medias are using that against religion in general. But in fact, secularism means that you can have your own faith, but you have not to let's say, express your faith and your beliefs in this let's say in the public space.
Yeah, right.
That's it. That has been used and instrumentalized also here in France.
Khaled, what would you say to Anne's response and the argument that is often being made? It's not a French product, Charlie Hebdo. It's freedom of expression, it's freedom of media. At the end of the day, why is the French government politically being punished?
Because it's the government and it's President Macron who is sanctioning the speech of Charlie Hebdo. He's endorsing their speech. I understand that Charlie Hebdo is a private actor. I understand that, and actually, I actually support Charlie Hebdo's right to publish and express whatever ideas that they want. That isn't the point. And when the panelists said that secularism is hard to understand, it isn't hard to understand. You know, I'm in the United States. We have the First Amendment here, where individuals have the right to freely exercise their religion. We have the principle where the state separates religious establishment from state policy. That is the case here in the United States. What the point of the matter is, beyond the theory of what secularism is that the French state has for a long time, right? So this is not new, but for a long time weaponized secularism. It's weaponized laïcité as a blunt instrument to persecute Muslims in that country. We see this time and time again. Why can't we frame these individual acts of murder, of violence, as individual acts? These are aberrant acts by individuals. These are not emblematic of an entire religion at crisis. So when President Macron issues and spews rhetoric that the entire faith of Islam is in crisis, what he's actually doing tacitly is puppeting the idea that we're engaged in a clash of civilizations, right? French, for a long time, has been an Islamophobic powder keg, where it only takes one incident, one violent act by a Muslim actor to incite this idea that France is at war with its Muslims. Right. And you can just look at the racial and religious segregation of France and French cities. Muslims are concentrated and packed away in distant suburbs they call banlieues. People on the ground are fearful of Muslims if you travel in downtown areas. So I think that this myth of secularism and this myth of laïcité as being equally applied to French citizens across religions is a myth, and it's a lie, to be frank with you. We don't see religious discrimination being an issue with atheists. We don't see religious discrimination and laïcité being an issue with agnostics or Christians or Catholics. It's only an issue when Muslims are trying to freely exercise their faith, and they can't because of the headscarf ban, they can't because of the Islamic covering ban, they can't because of legislation enacted last year where Muslim mothers who wear the headscarf can't accompany their children on school trips. This is an issue of structural and institutionalized Islamophobia, which the French government has established and enacted for a long time.
Right. Let's give Denis a chance to jump in here. Denis, I saw you shake your head when Khaled was listing these points and making the argument that France has a tradition of being Islamophobic. Your statement, your reply.
Yeah, many things have been said. First of all, you know, the panelists were talking about the United States. I dare you to go to U.S. officials and ask them to close the pool so Muslim women can bathe, and you will see what the American official will tell you. So don't compare, the French government with the American government. That's one thing. Second, and that's the big problem I have, in that situation is, if France is so bad, if France has been so racist, bad colonial experience, then how come so many migrants come to France? I mean, I don't understand. I've been hearing, all the time that France is bad, but, people still arrive by the thousands every month. So there's a lot of incoherence in this process, and it's as if you criticize this restaurant, you say you hate the food, the service is horrible, but you keep going every week. Doesn't make sense to me. So that's first thing. And you talk about, France having a history of anti-Muslim. I disagree with you. I mean, look, I'll give you a counterexample. We have a huge Asian community in France, okay, mostly Vietnamese, for political and colonial reasons. We never heard we have had any problem with the Vietnamese community. Indochina was pro-French colonies as well. How come we have no problem with this community? Because they all assimilated, they opened restaurants, for instance, they brought their culture as a gift and not as a demand. So I'd like you to answer those questions. If France is so bad, how do you explain, thousands of people crossing the border and rush to become French citizens?
Khaled.
It just doesn't make sense.
Well, so, I mean, look, there are two things that you said that are, latently problematic. So the notion that Muslims are only recent immigrants is a myth and is tied to xenophobia. Second, the idea that why are immigrants coming to France in large numbers? Part of that is largely economic and, as you know, tied to colonial reasons. A large number of Muslims in France come from obviously North African states that France has colonized, right? You can't can't unroot the fact. What do you mean? So?
Okay,
Tell me why.
So that's not the point. The point is you said France is a bad country, but they're still coming. So then France is not that bad at all, actually.
I mean, if you've taken a history class, right, history 101, you'd understand that part of the causation of colonialism is that individuals. I mean, why is that funny? France colonized a country like Algeria for roughly a century.
But go ahead, teacher. Go ahead.
Exactly. I mean, maybe you need to enroll in a class.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
When you kill 2 million Algerians over a span of 10 years, bludgeon their country economically, right? Take all of their artifacts and take all of their resources. It's simple causation that individuals from that country will go to the nation that they've been economically pillaged by. That's why, like you said, Vietnamese come in large number to France. That's why here in the United States we have a large number of Mexicans as a consequence of NAFTA coming into the United States. You can't look at colonialism as a relic of the past. You have to look at the residual impact of colonialism as being a pathway and a gateway to contemporary immigration. Now, for you to overlook that would be anti-intellectual and would be ignorant.
No, not at all. So what you're saying basically is colonization was bad, and because it's bad, people want to fight back, and that's why they're coming to France as a revenge. I mean, what I don't get it. Again, like.
Just briefly, Khaled. So I want to bring in Anne again. Go ahead.
Let me make it clear for you. When a country is as a consequence of colonization is economically bankrupt a nation, people need jobs, people need homes, people need to feed their families. So they go to the country that is wealthy as a consequence of that colonialism. Yeah. And that is the country.
So since you're very knowledgeable, when France decolonized Algeria, for instance?
In 1961. I mean, that's only what, 2 generations.
So, all right. So so for almost 80 years, Algeria didn't have the luxury or the process to rebuild the country. And again, look at the Vietnamese community.
Listen, clearly some obvious disputes here, but I do want to and look at the president himself, Macron, when he came to power, obviously he was a lightning rod, a very, very popular figure on the European and global scene, as a matter of fact. He was a very moderate candidate, an alternative to a right and left. Why do you think he took this turn? Is he so under pressure domestically that perhaps also from the Rassemblement National, that he has to take this route down to seek this confrontation with the Muslim world?
Another president like Jacques Chirac, for instance, which was our president since, let's say, more than 10 years, would have not taken such decision, because also the political and international context was very different. I think that there is a internal political pressure on Macron, and he has a very, very little room for maneuver. So now he cannot go, he cannot withdraw what he has said, and I don't think he was for those cartoons, but as I mentioned at the beginning, is the freedom of media. So we cannot, in the law, they are free to publish everything. And again, I would like just to go back to what has been said by your panelists, and I think that I do notice that Mr. Beydoun is really love caricatures because he has just caricaturized France and its relationship with Islam. We have to notice that Islam is the last religion that came to be, let's say, came to France through migrations and so on. At the beginning, you have, of course, Christianity, because it's our roots, and of course, Jewish also. Then Islam is new in France, so that will take time to organize things and to cool down. To go back to some form of appeasement, right, and not radicalization of speech or radicalization of position that abroad and also internally have been instrumentalized and caricaturized.
Right. Denis, very quickly, many governments in Europe have come out in defense of Macron. They've displayed solidarity. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, Macron met with German Chancellor Merkel and Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, and they all decided, yes, we will be much more decisive from now on in combating radical Islam. This is something that ought to please you, but are you also displeased that Macron is fishing in your voter pond?
Well, nothing is pleasing with a potential, identity war within France. A clash of civilization. Because that's what the word has been using many times. There's nothing to be happy about it. I do believe that Macron has no choice. Like, there's a situation, and if he ignores it, then it will be detrimental for himself, for his image, but also for the country. And don't forget, the elections are coming in 2 years. Do I believe that he's using that as a leverage for his election? Maybe. I have a limited trust in this president. However, he cannot deny what's happening.
Right.
And again, the question is what do we do? Let's ask ourselves the right question: what works with Islam in France, and what doesn't work? Right. And without fighting or just cutting people's throats. There's different different answer to that.
Khaled, we're almost out of time, but I do want to give you the last word, saying Islam and Macron seems to be waging, for whatever reason, political reason, domestic political reason, some war of words, at least, a cultural war against Islam. What is the way out of this dilemma?
Look, there is no crisis, right? There are 8 million French Muslims living peacefully in that country. There were vile acts committed by 2 to 3 people over a span of a couple of weeks. Now do the math. The single percentage of deviant acts by Muslims is minimal. What's taking place is Macron is capitalizing on this to create a crisis for political purposes, right? He wants to capture some of the votes that my panelist, Mr. Franceskin's party, occupies, so he can be elected president again. Now, if 3 to 4 individuals have committed vile acts out of a mass of 8 million people, that is not a crisis. That is a consequential issue. And the solution is to simply prosecute these individuals, bring them to justice, and not indict and demonize an entire people and an entire faith.
And Giudicelli, Denis Franceskin, and Khaled Beydoun, thank you so much for joining us and framing this very heated discussion that is currently going on in the conflict between France and the Muslim world. Thank you out there for watching, and we'll be back again with a new edition very soon.